The royal court expected Ceryssa Lowen to drop the cold hearthstone before she reached the wedding flame. Noble wolves lined both sides of the First Pack Hearth, their eyes fixed on the black relic in her arms. It was the oldest stone of the Vaelthorne line, a fist-sized heart of dead coal veined with grey, carried only when an alpha king took a luna before the first fire. By the time she reached the center of the hall, the record knife was already waiting beside the wedding flame. Thin, curved, clean, made not to kill bodies, made to remove names. Ceryssa saw it on the silver tray and understood why Lady Phaedra Morn had asked her to carry the cold hearthstone. This was not charity. This was erasure dressed as tradition. Tonight, before the Alpha King married his Luna, they meant to scrape Ceryssa Lowen out of the royal hearthline. Let her carry it, Phaedra had said, smiling for the court. If the hearth rejects her, no one can accuse us of cruelty when her name is removed. So Ceryssa carried it. She did not stumble. That disappointed them. She had been raised inside the royal walls, but never inside the royal name. Fed but not claimed. Sheltered but not embraced. Called ward when they wanted mercy, to look noble servant when they needed quiet hands, burden when they thought she could not hear. Since childhood she had polished the stones around the First Pack Hearth, swept winter ash from its mouth, and prayed beside it when the war banners left and no one else remembered to ask the fire to bring the soldiers home. Now the court watched her carry the heart of that home as if she had stolen the right to touch it. At the far end of the hall, Alpha King Maddoc Vaelthorne stood beside the first fire. He was all black fur, mantle, silver crown, and controlled violence, a king built from war and winter. His pale, amber eyes moved from the stone to Ceryssa's hands. Something in his expression tightened. Ceryssa had known him before the crown made him untouchable. Once years ago he had found her shivering near the kitchen yard, after a feast no one had called her to. He had thrown his cloak around her shoulders and said no one under his roof would freeze. He had forgotten. Or worse, he had remembered only when remembering cost him something. The cold hearthstone shifted against her palms. Then it warmed. Ceryssa's breath caught. Not pain, not a burn. Heat opened beneath her skin like an ember waking after years of being buried. A faint red glow threaded through the grey veins of the stone, thin as blood beneath ice. The first fire leaned toward her. Only for a heartbeat. Phaedra stepped smoothly between Ceryssa and the hearth. The flame straightened, but the smile on Phaedra's face had sharpened. "Careful, Ward Lowen," she said. "That stone has broken worthier hands." "I have it," Ceryssa answered. Her voice was quiet, but the stone pulsed once as if it had heard. Maddoc's gaze lifted to her face. The hall hushed. Ceryssa stopped before the carved circle, where the names of past lunas had been cut into the floor. She was not allowed to cross it. A hearth priest lowered a silver staff to block her path. "Ward Lowen stops there," he said. Phaedra extended her hands. "Give me the stone." The cold hearthstone warmed harder. It did not want to leave her. Ceryssa looked down at the black relic and felt with a slow terror that the stone was not awakening for the bride. It was remembering the hands that had held warmth when no one was watching. Her scraped fingers feeding kindling into the first fire at 13. Her tears falling into ash the night Maddoc rode to war. Her blood on the hearthstones after she scrubbed them through winter until her skin split. All the quiet offerings no ledger had counted. Maddoc's hand closed around the arm of his throne. The carved wolf head cracked beneath his fingers. "Who placed a record knife beside my wedding fire?" he asked. No one answered. Phaedra lowered her lashes. "Only the law, my king." His eyes did not leave the blade. Law does not hide like a thief. For true one impossible breath, Ceryssa almost believed he would stop it. Then Lord Vaust, keeper of the royal household records, stepped forward with a white-threaded scroll. His mouth was pale. His fingers were steady. He had done this before. By marriage law, he announced all dependent names not bound by blood, dowry, sworn service, or direct hearthright must be removed before the new Luna receives the cold hearthstone. Ceryssa stared at the scroll. Somewhere inside it her name waited in a margin. Not daughter, not kin, not chosen, but there. Phaedra's voice lowered. After tonight, the royal hearth will belong to its lawful mistress. Then she touched 2 fingers to the silver tray. A silent command. Vaust lifted the record knife. Ceryssa looked at the knife, then at the king who had remembered too late, then at the woman waiting to inherit the warmth Ceryssa had kept alive with bleeding hands. No, she said. The word was not loud, but the cold hearthstone answered it. Red light surged through the black coal. The candles nearest the hearth bent towards Ceryssa. Wolves along the walls recoiled not from fear alone, but from recognition. The first fire turned white at its center. Take the knife off her name, Maddoc said. The command struck the hole like a blade drawn halfway from its sheath. Vaust froze. Phaedra did not. My king, she whispered. One name is not worth breaking a marriage treaty. Lord Vaust pressed the record knife to the scroll. Ceryssa Lowen, unblooded ward of no active house, is hereby removed from the warmth, protection, and memory of the royal Maddoc moved. Stop. Too late. Ceryssa did not ask the fire to save her. She simply stopped carrying what had never thanked her. She bent and set the cold hearthstone on the floor outside the lunar circle. The moment her hands left it, the wedding flame went black. Not dim, not low, black. Darkness swallowed the First Pack Hearth in a single breath. Wall torches vanished. Hanging lamps collapsed into smoke. Braziers became bowls of dead ash. Beyond the hall, answering silence rolled through the palace. Kitchen fires, guard fires, sickroom lamps, wolf camp embers. Every pack flame bound to the first hearth, extinguishing as if the kingdom's heart had closed. Only the cold hearthstone still glowed at Ceryssa's feet. Then ash rose from the dead, first fire shaped like the head of an ancient wolf. Its ember eyes opened on the court, who gave them leave to cast out the hearth-blood. Phaedra staggered back. Maddoc stared at Ceryssa, as if the dark had finally shown him what fire had hidden for years. The wolf of ash turned its burning gaze toward the record knife. The hearth does not belong to brides, it growled. It belongs to the one who kept it burning when kings forgot. The first scream came from outside the hall. It cut through the dead darkness of the First Pack Hearth, sharp enough to make every wolf turn toward the sealed bronze doors. A second cry followed from the lower corridors. Then a third, farther away, carried through stone vents and old chimney shafts, until the entire palace seemed to be breathing panic. The kitchens, someone whispered. No, another voice answered. The guard towers. A runner slammed into the doors from the other side, pounding with both fists. The east braziers are out, the barracks have no fire, the sick rooms are freezing. No one moved toward him. No one could. The wedding hall had become a cave of black stone and frightened eyes. Noble wolves who had spent their lives commanding servants to light lamps now stood helpless in their silks, staring at the dead torches as if darkness were a beast crouched inches from their throats. The first fire, which had never gone out through famine, siege, plague, or royal death, lay flat in its sacred pit as grey ash. Only the cold hearthstone gave light. It glowed at Ceryssa's feet, red-veined and quiet, as if it had done exactly what it meant to do. Ceryssa did not kneel to it. She stood with her hands empty. That frightened the court more than if she had screamed. Lady Phaedra recovered first. She always did. Her white wedding furs looked ghostly in the stone's red glow, her face pale with rage beneath its careful beauty. She pointed one jeweled hand at Ceryssa. She stole it, Phaedra said. The words struck the dark like thrown glass. Several nobles seized them at once, grateful for a shape to give their fear. She stole the royal fire. Forbidden hearth-blood, witchcraft. Keeper magic was outlawed after the Ash rebellions. Ceryssa looked from one accusing face to another and felt something inside her settle into a colder shape. They had been ready to erase her when the hearth was warm. Now that it had answered, they were ready to burn her for making it speak. Maddoc stepped down from the dais. The movement silenced the nearest wolves. Even without flame, he carried the pressure of command. His shadow crossed the dead lunar circle and stopped between Ceryssa and Phaedra. No one touches her, he said. Phaedra's eyes flashed. You would protect the cause of this, I would know what was done before I condemn what answered. Phaedra's voice sharpened. My king, that thing should have warmed for your bride. Instead, she carried it into the hall, and every pack flame died. If you do not name this theft now, the Morn Treaty will read your silence as insult. The Morn lords stirred behind her. Their hands went to sword hilts. Not drawn, not yet, but near enough for the message to be clear. Maddoc's jaw tightened. Ceryssa saw it then, the trap closing around him. If he defended her, he risked the marriage treaty meant to secure the Eastern Pacts. If he surrendered her, he might save his crown's bargain and lose whatever ancient power had just turned the kingdom dark. Phaedra knew it too. She smiled. Lord Vaus tried to move. It was a small motion, cowardly and quick. He folded the household scroll against his chest and stepped backward toward the shadow behind a pillar. The record knife gleamed in his other hand. The ash in the first fire stirred. A wolf-shaped head rose from the dead pit, larger now shoulders, forming from smoke and ember dust. Its eyes fixed on Vaust. The keeper of records dropped to one knee as if an invisible weight had struck his spine. The scroll fell from his arms and unfurled across the floor. Names spilled into the red light. Ceryssa saw hers at once. Not in the servant ledger, not in the charity margin. Her name had been written under an older heading buried beneath scraped ink and fresh witness seals. Hearth kept. The word pulsed once before Phaedra's skirt swept over it. Her heel came down hard on the glowing word. The red light burned through the white silk of her slipper. Phaedra hissed, but she did not move her foot. "Do not look at it," she snapped. "No one looks at old lies." Ceryssa looked anyway. Hearth kept. Not loved, not daughter, but kept by the hearth because she had kept it first. The words hurt more than insult. They named a truth no person in the hall had ever bothered to see. Maddoc saw it. His expression changed, not softened, not yet, but split by recognition. A memory moved behind his eyes, a younger girl at the edge of a winter feast, hands red from ash water, a cloak thrown too late, a vow made by a boy who had not known crowns could teach men to forget. "Ceryssa," he said lower now. "Did you know?" She almost laughed. No. The honesty made several wolves flinch. "I knew I was cold when no one called me in," she said. "I knew the hearth stayed warm when I cleaned it. I knew your soldiers came home on nights I prayed beside it until my knees bruised. But no, your majesty. No one told me I had a name worth hiding." The title cut him. She saw it land. Phaedra stepped forward. "You hear her. She admits to private rites beside the first fire." "I admitted to prayer," Ceryssa said. "You admitted to touching power above your station." Ceryssa turned to her fully. "No. I admitted your station was built on what I kept alive." The hall went still. For one breath, even the ash wolf watched her. Phaedra's mask cracked. "Not much." "Enough." Her eyes flicked to the scroll, then to the cold hearthstone, then to the dead first fire. Fear lived there, quick and ugly, Ceryssa understood. If her name was erased, Phaedra would not merely become Maddoc's wife. She would receive the first fire with no hidden keeper standing between her hand and every pack flame bound to Vaelthorne rule. This was not jealousy. It was conquest dressed in bridal white. A horn sounded outside the hall, weak and frantic. Then another. A guard shouted through the doors, "My king!" The outer wolf camps are going dark. The northern wolf barracks are icing from the stones upward. No flame will catch. Phaedra turned instantly. "Then command the ward to restore them." Maddoc looked at Ceryssa. So did everyone else. At last, the court wanted something from her openly. Ceryssa looked down at the cold hearthstone. The red veins moved like a sleeping pulse. It had warmed in her hands. It had gone cold for them. It had killed the fires when they tried to remove her name. She could pick it up. She could save the hall that had watched her humiliation like entertainment. Or she could leave them with the dark they had chosen. Maddoc took one step closer, careful now, as if approaching a wounded animal that still had the right to bite. "Ceryssa," he said, and this time her name sounded less like command than confession. "I am asking, not ordering." That mattered. Not enough, but it mattered. Phaedra's lips parted in fury. "You do not ask a ward for permission to use a royal relic." Maddoc did not look away from Ceryssa. Tonight proved it was never only royal. Ceryssa bent. The court inhaled as one, but she did not kneel to Maddoc Phaedra or the ash wolf. Ceryssa picked up the cold hearthstone because she chose to. The moment her fingers closed around it, red light climbed her wrists, not burning, not binding, only recognizing. One dead candle behind her burst into a low crimson flame, then another, not where Phaedra stood, not around Maddoc's throne, only along the path nearest Ceryssa's feet. She took one step away from the lunar circle. A thin line of fire followed. Phaedra stared at it with open hatred. "Stop her." One guard took half a step. Maddoc turned his head. "Finish that step," he said, "and you answer to me before you answer to your house." The guard stopped breathing. No one else moved. The ash wolf lowered its head toward the floor, not bowing but scenting the red flame as if it were an old trail. Ceryssa took another step. More candles woke behind her, small and red, leaving the rest of the hall black. The court understood then. The fire was not returning to the palace. It was following the keeper. Maddoc understood it too. His face went hard with a fear he did not try to hide. If she leaves the First Pack Hearth, the ash wolf growled, its voice rolling through the dead chimneys, the kingdom will freeze before dawn. The palace bells began counting down to the kingdom's death. Each iron note rolled through the dark First Pack Hearth like a warning struck from bone. 4 bells until dawn. 4 bells before the outer camps froze hard enough to crack stone. 4 bells before every lesser pack bound to Vaelthorne rule woke to cold hearths, black chimneys, and wolves howling over dead embers. Ceryssa stood beyond the lunar circle with the cold hearthstone in her hands. Red fire followed her feet. It did not fill the hall. It did not return to the chandeliers, the braziers, or the first fire pit. It moved only where she moved a narrow trail of warmth, licking over the black floor behind her hem. Nobles shifted closer to it before pride stopped them. Servants did not bother pretending. They leaned toward the heat with blue lips and frightened eyes. Phaedra saw that too. Her burned slipper smoked against the floor, the white silk ruined where she had crushed the glowing word hearth kept beneath her heel. Pain sharpened her face, but rage held her upright. "My king," she said, turning from Ceryssa to Maddoc, "the eastern packs did not cross winter roads to watch you hand the first fire to an unregistered ward." Maddoc did not answer. His gaze remained on the red flame at Ceryssa's feet. Phaedra stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate and cruel. "If you shelter her now, House Morn withdraws its banners before dawn. The eastern watchtowers close. The river passes close. Every wolf who pledged under my treaty will hear that the Alpha King broke faith for a servant with forbidden hearth blood." Morn blades shifted in the dark. "Not drawn. Promised." Ceryssa felt Maddoc's power coil through the hall, dangerous and restrained. He had won wars by refusing to flinch under worse threats than this. Yet this was not a battlefield. It was his wedding hall. His dying fire. His forgotten vow standing barefoot before him with the kingdom's warmth in her hands. Phaedra pressed the wound. "Choose carefully. A king who cannot protect a treaty cannot protect a throne." Maddoc looked at her then. "No," he said. "A king who lets law be used to erase a name has already lost more than a throne." The words landed heavily, but Ceryssa did not soften. Words were warm. For a moment, then they cooled. A horn sounded outside the hall, weak and frantic. Then another. A white line of frost crept beneath the bronze doors. It moved like a living thing, thin at first, then branching across the black floor toward the dead first fire. The nearest servants stumbled back. Ceryssa looked down. 4 bells until dawn suddenly felt generous. The ash wolf in the dead first fire lowered its head toward Lord Vaust. The keeper of records knelt beside the unfurled scroll, his face slick with sweat despite the spreading cold. The record knife lay near his hand, thin and bright, still stained with the first scraped fibers of Ceryssa's name. "Keeper," the ash wolf growled. Vaust pressed his forehead to the floor. "I obeyed marriage law." The red fire at Ceryssa's feet bent toward him. The ash wolf's ember eyes narrowed. "You obeyed ink." Vaust trembled. "Who hid Hearth-kept?" Maddoc asked. Phaedra's chin lifted. "This is theater, old ash accusing loyal servants. The treaty does not require us to entertain dead smoke." Ceryssa moved one step closer to the scroll. The red fire followed. Phaedra stopped speaking. Vaust tried to reach for the parchment, but the ash wolf exhaled. Gray ash wrapped around his wrist and slammed his hand flat to the stone. "No one touches the scroll," Ceryssa said. Her voice surprised even her. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The cold hearthstone pulsed against her palms, and the small red flames along the floor leaned forward, listening. Maddoc looked at her. So did the court. Ceryssa swallowed the old instinct to lower her eyes. No one touches the scroll, she repeated. No one calls me ward again. And that knife breaks before this court before I return one spark to a house that used my name as kindling. A stunned silence followed. Phaedra laughed once. You bargain with a king, Ceryssa looked at her burned slipper. No, I bargain with the hearth. The ash wolf's mouth opened, showing teeth made of coal light. For the first time, it looked amused. Maddoc stepped toward the record knife. Phaedra moved fast. If you break that blade, you break lawful witness. If witness hides erasure, Maddoc said it deserves to break. He picked up the knife. The hall seemed to hold its breath. The record knife had removed bastards from noble ledgers, widows from inheritance rolls, debt-bound servants from winter protections. It was not merely steel. It was legal memory sharpened into a tool. Maddoc placed it across the edge of the hearth dais. Then he brought his fist down. Silver snapped. The sound cracked through the dead hall. One half of the blade skidded across the floor and stopped at Phaedra's feet. Her face went white. Ceryssa felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, not trust, but the first broken ring of an old chain she had never been allowed to name. Maddoc was not finished. He drew the broken edge across his palm. Blood opened black-red under the cold hearthstone's glow. Ceryssa stiffened. What are you doing? What should have been done before anyone asked you to carry what we forgot? He knelt on one knee beside the scroll. The court made a low, shocked sound, quickly strangled. Alpha Kings did not kneel before household records. Maddoc pressed his bleeding hand over the place where Ceryssa's name glowed beneath scraped ink. I, Maddoc Vaelthorne, crown-bearer of the First Pack Hearth, witness that the crown forgot Ceryssa Lowen while taking warmth from her hands. The scroll drank his blood. Red lines raced through old parchment. Hidden words surfaced beneath layers of altered ink. Names, dates, winter marks, hearth offerings, Ceryssa's childhood prayers recorded in ash script. Her blood counted where no servant had counted it. Her vigil nights beside the first fire marked year after year. Vaust began to sob. The ash wolf lowered its muzzle until ember smoke brushed his neck. Who ordered it hidden? Vaust shook his head. I cannot. Ceryssa took one step closer. The fire came with her. You can, she said. You scraped my life into silence. Now give it back. Vaust looked at Maddoc as if begging the king to stop what had already begun. Maddoc's voice turned deadly quiet. Answer her. Vaust broke. It was not Lady Phaedra. Phaedra froze. Every face turned. Vaust lifted his head, eyes red and terrified. The first concealment was made 16 years ago, before the Morn Treaty, before her wedding claim. The order bore the black seal of the late Alpha. Maddoc went utterly still. Ceryssa felt the cold hearthstone flare so hot that red light flooded her arms. Vaust whispered the rest. Ceryssa Lowen was hidden from the Hearthline by command of the Vaelthorne blood itself. For one heartbeat, no one breathed. Then Phaedra smiled, not with triumph over Ceryssa, with triumph over Maddoc. The dead Alpha's seal turned the hall colder than the dying dawn outside. Maddoc did not move. For the first time since Ceryssa had known him, the Alpha King looked less like a throne and more like a son, standing beneath the weight of a father's crime. His blood still stained the scroll. His broken record knife lay in 2 pieces near the hearth dais. Around him, the nobles of the First Pack Hearth waited to see whether guilt would weaken him enough to use. Phaedra stepped into that silence with perfect grace. Do you see my king? She asked softly. I did not erase her. Your blood did. The words struck exactly where she meant them to. Ceryssa felt Maddoc turn toward her, but she stepped back before he could speak. The red flames at her feet moved with her, thin and obedient, leaving him in colder shadow. His jaw tightened. She hated that she noticed the pain in his eyes. She hated more that it was not enough. How many years? She asked. No one answered. Ceryssa looked at the dead first fire, at the scroll, at the black stone glowing in her hands. How many years did your house burn because of me? Maddoc's face changed. Not with denial, with horror. Vaust made a broken sound near the floor. The ash wolf lowered its head, and ember smoke curled around the record keeper's throat. Answer, Maddoc said. Vaust's lips shook. Not because of you, Hearthkept. Through you. Ceryssa went still. Phaedra's eyes sharpened, storing the word like a blade. Vaust swallowed. The late Alpha feared the first fire was failing. After the northern famine, after the winter fever, the hearth would not hold royal flame for more than a night. Then the Lowen child was brought into the palace. The fire steadied near her. The old Alpha ordered her name entered under Hearthkept, then sealed from public record. Ceryssa's fingers tightened around the stone. A childhood of narrow rooms, cold meals, and half-open doors passed through her mind in a single brutal thread. They had not forgotten what she was. They had hidden it. Maddoc took one step toward her. Ceryssa, no. Her voice cracked once, then hardened. Do not make my name sound like apology if you still do not know the whole debt. He stopped. That was wise. Phaedra moved closer to the Morn Lords. You hear it now. The Vaelthorne line fed its kingdom with hidden keeper magic, forbidden magic, unwitnessed magic. If Maddoc protects her, the Eastern Pacts will not merely withdraw. We will name his crown unlawful before every winter court. A murmur ran through the nobles. This time it was not fear of Ceryssa. It was fear of scandal, of treaty collapse, of finding out the kingdom's sacred warmth had rested for years on the hands of a girl they had ordered to stand outside the family circle. Maddoc looked at Phaedra. You knew enough to use the knife. I knew enough to protect my house from yours, she said. Do not dress your father's sin in my veil. The line landed clean. Ceryssa saw it. Phaedra was no fool. She no longer needed to prove Ceryssa was dangerous. She only needed to prove the Vaelthorne crown had been built on a hidden wrong. The Ashwolf's ember eyes turned back to Vaust. There is more, it growled. Vaust shook his head at once. I cannot open it. What Ceryssa asked. The record keeper looked toward the dead first fire. A sealed order lies beneath the hearth pit, the first command. The one written before her name was buried. I was given only the copy mark, never the full text. Phaedra's expression flickered. Not surprise. Recognition. Maddoc saw it too. What opens it, he asked. Vaust stared at his own hands. Vaelthorne blood. Maddoc lifted his bleeding palm, and Vaust whispered the hand of the Hearthkept. The hall seemed to shrink around Ceryssa. Of course. Even the truth required her touch. Even the crime done to her could not be revealed without asking more from her. Maddoc understood at the same moment. He did not command. He did not reach for her. He only turned his cut palm upward, blood dark in the red glow. I have no right to ask, he said. No, Ceryssa answered. You do not. The words wounded him, but he bowed his head and took them. That mattered. Not enough. Still, beyond the bronze doors, frost thickened. It climbed the hinges in white veins. Somewhere outside, a wolf howled once, and was answered by dozens more distant, frightened, fading into cold. The kingdom did not have the luxury of her pain. Ceryssa hated that, too. She stepped toward the dead first fire. Maddoc moved beside her, not close enough to touch. Together they stood before the ash pit where the sacred flame had burned for centuries. He pressed his bleeding hand to the blackened stone rim. Ceryssa set her palm beside his, the cold hearthstone held against her wrist. The ash pit opened, not with a crack, with a breath. Stone sank inward, old soot lifted in a spiral. Beneath the first fire lay a flat black tablet sealed in silver root lines, its surface untouched by flame. Words began to burn across it one by one in deep red script. Maddoc leaned closer. Ceryssa read first, not because she was quicker, because the tablet turned toward her. By order of Alpha Rhaegan Vaelthorne, the child Ceryssa Lowen is to be kept near the first fire unnamed. before court unclaimed, before law, and never released from the royal Hearthline. The hall went silent. Then the final line appeared. Not keeper, not ward, the last living hearth claim. Phaedra was the first to understand how dangerous the word could become. Not for Ceryssa. For the crown. She moved before the final red letters finished smoking on the black tablet. Her white skirt swept over the frost-veined floor, one burned slipper leaving a dark stain behind her. Close it, she ordered Vaust. Seal the pit. This is not a wedding record. This is dead treason. Vaust did not rise. The ash wolf's smoke still curled around his throat. Ceryssa stared at the tablet beneath the first fire and felt the cold hearthstone beating against her wrist. The words had not called her daughter. They had not called her bride. They had not even called her keeper. Claim. A word used for land. For debt. For rights no one could erase without consequence. Phaedra turned sharply toward the court. You all heard it. The late Alpha ordered her kept near the hearthline. That means she belongs to this house by royal command. The red flame at Ceryssa's feet snapped higher. Maddoc's head lifted. Phaedra pressed on, elegant and merciless. If she is a claim, then she is not a witness. She is property bound to Vaelthorne need. My king command what your father lawfully kept. The words passed through Ceryssa like winter water. Property. After all of it, after the stone, the fire, the hidden name, they were still trying to find a cleaner chain. Maddoc looked at Phaedra as if he had finally seen the shape beneath her beauty. No, one word, low enough to be deadly. Phaedra's smile sharpened. Then you deny your own father's order. I deny your mouth the right to use it. A Morn lord stepped forward, hand on his blade. Careful, Vaelthorne. Maddoc did not turn. Careful ended when your lady tried to put a living woman under a knife. The lord's fingers tightened. Ceryssa saw Maddoc's shoulders shift. Not much. Enough for the wolf under his skin to show in the air. The hall bent beneath his dominance. But Ceryssa did not want another man's power standing in place of her answer. She stepped between them. The red fire came with her. No one commands me from that tablet, she said. Phaedra laughed softly. You do not even know what it means. Then we read it. Vaust made a sound of terror. No. The Ashwolf's ember eyes turned. Vaust shook his head harder. The full order was never meant to be spoken in court. Ceryssa looked down at him. Neither was my name. That silenced him. Maddoc stepped beside the open pit, bleeding hand still curled at his side. Read it. Vaust's lips trembled. I cannot. The tablet will not answer me. Then answer her, Maddoc said. Ceryssa set the cold hearthstone on the rim of the sunken hearth. This time she did not release it completely. One hand stayed on the stone. One hand lowered toward the black tablet. The moment her fingertips touched the red script, the hall filled with heat. Not comfort, memory. The First Pack Hearth flashed around her in broken images, herself as a child asleep beside ash buckets. The old Alpha watching from a shadowed balcony. Servants ordered to leave her near the fire during long winter nights. Her small hands pressed to the stones, while royal healers whispered that the flame strengthened when she cried. Ceryssa pulled back with a gasp. Maddoc caught himself before reaching for her. Good. If he had touched her, then she might have hated him for needing comfort more than truth. What did you see? He asked. Ceryssa's voice came out thin. Your father knew. Maddoc closed his eyes once. Only once. Phaedra seized the wound. Of course he knew. And he used her because the crown required it. That is what rulers do. They spend what must be spent. Ceryssa turned. The hall went colder than the frost. I was 8. Even Phaedra's smile flickered. I was 8. Ceryssa repeated when your kings learn my tears warmed their fire. Maddoc flinched as if struck. Outside, another horn sounded. This one broke halfway through. The frost beneath the bronze doors thickened, crawling in white branches toward the noble's boots. A servant cried out as ice caught the hem of her dress. Ceryssa looked at the spreading cold, then at the court. You want fire? She asked. No one answered. You will have truth first. She pressed her palm flat to the tablet. Red letters burned upward, larger this time, crawling across the air itself. A hearth claim is not owned by the house. Phaedra stepped back. The ash wolf raised its head. The next line seared through the dark. The house is answerable to the claim. Maddoc stared at the words, blood dripping from his palm onto the dead stones. Then the tablet cracked open down the center, revealing one final line hidden beneath the first command. If the claim is unnamed, unhonored, or cast out, all fires fed by her keeping shall return to her hand alone. Ceryssa lifted the cold hearthstone. Every red flame in the hall bent toward her like a field of burning grass in wind. Phaedra whispered, "Then she can take the kingdom from you." Ceryssa looked at Maddoc. "No," she said. "Your house already did." The frost reached the first noble's boot and did not stop. A lord of House Morn stumbled backward with a curse shaking his foot as white ice climbed over polished leather. The servants near the wall huddled together, breath-turning silver in the dark. Beyond the bronze doors, the palace had gone almost silent now. Not safe silent, frozen silent. The kind that came when screams had spent themselves and cold began doing quieter work. Ceryssa held the cold hearthstone against her chest. The red flames bent toward her. No one asked if she could feel the kingdom dying. She could. Every dead pack flame tugged at the stone like a hand beneath water. Kitchen hearths, watchtower braziers, war camp embers, small cottage fires on the outer slopes. The first fire had fed them for generations, but now every path of warmth had turned back toward the girl no one had named. Phaedra saw the court's fear turning from accusation into need, so she changed her blade. "If the house is answerable to the claim," she said, her voice carrying cleanly through the dark, "then the house is guilty." Maddoc looked at her. Phaedra turned to the nobles. "You heard the tablet. The Vaelthorne line hid a living hearth claim, used her power, erased her standing, and nearly cast her out during a royal marriage. By winter law, a guilty crown cannot hold sole custody of the first fire." Several Morn lords lifted their heads. Ceryssa understood the shift at once. Phaedra no longer needed to prove Ceryssa was a thief. She only needed to prove Maddoc was unfit to guard what his bloodline had abused. Maddoc's voice was low. "Choose your next words carefully." "I have," Phaedra said. "House Morn offers lawful custody of the first fire until the Vaelthorne crown is cleansed." A bitter laugh left Ceryssa before she could stop it. Phaedra's eyes cut to her. "Custody," Ceryssa said. "That is what you call taking warmth from one hand and placing it under another. I call it order. I call it hunger wearing court silk." A few servants looked at Ceryssa then, not with pity, with something more dangerous. Hope. Maddoc saw it too. Phaedra did not like that. "My king, if you refuse lawful custody, the eastern packs will name you oath-broken before sunrise. They will close the passes and leave your outer wolves to freeze." The whole waited for Maddoc to roar. He did not. Instead, he reached up and removed his crown. The movement struck the court harder than any command. The Vaelthorne crown was black iron and old silver forged around a shard of the first wolf's tooth. Maddoc held it for one breath and set it on the edge of the hearth dais beside the broken record knife. "I will not cleanse my crown by handing her to another house," he said. Phaedra paled. "You cannot set aside kingship in the middle of a winter crisis. I am not setting it aside." Maddoc looked at Ceryssa. "I am placing it where the debt is." The cold hearthstone pulsed. Ceryssa hated the pull those words made in her chest. Not forgiveness, but witness. Maddoc turned back to the court. "Before every house gathered here, I name the debt of my crown. Vaelthorne fire endured through Ceryssa Lowen's keeping. Vaelthorne law hid her. Vaelthorne silence used her. Until she gives consent, no treaty, bride, lord, or king will claim her hearth right." Phaedra's hands curled. Ceryssa felt the hall shift. Not enough. Never. Enough. But the old shape of power had cracked wider. A cry came from the servants near the bronze doors. One of the older kitchen women had collapsed, her fingers blue, her breath thin. Frost had crept beneath her skirts while the nobles argued lore over dying fire. Ceryssa moved before anyone else did. The red flames followed. Ceryssa Maddoc said, not stopping her. Good. She knelt beside the woman and touched the cold hearthstone to the floor. A small red flame rose no taller than a candle, then spread around the woman's hands. Warmth returned slowly. The servant gasped, coughing as color came back into her lips. Ceryssa looked over her shoulder at the court. I will not warm your pride first, she said. I will warm those you forgot first. No noble spoke. The ash wolf watched from the dead first fire ember, eyes bright. Phaedra's face emptied. That was worse than rage. She reached into the white fur at her waist and drew out a small glass vial filled with pale ash. Vaust saw it and made a choked sound. Morn, frost ash, he whispered. Maddoc's head snapped toward Phaedra. She smiled again. This time there was no silk over the cruelty. You think I came only to receive the first fire? Phaedra asked. No, my king. I came prepared in case your hidden hearth girl woke. She smashed the vial against the floor. White ash burst outward in a silent ring around Ceryssa. The red flames recoiled. For the first time, the cold hearthstone went cold in her hands. The servants nearest Ceryssa began to freeze first. Not all at once. Not mercifully. Frost climbed from the white ash ring in thin veins crawling over the black floor, touching shoes, hems, fingertips. The kitchen woman Ceryssa had warmed only moments before gasped as the small red flame beside her hand shrank to a dying bead. Phaedra stood outside the ring, breathing hard, one hand still lifted from throwing the vial. There, she said. That is what forbidden keeper magic becomes when properly contained. The cold hearthstone lay heavy and silent in Ceryssa's palms. Cold, truly cold. For a heartbeat, fear struck deeper than the frost. Not fear of death. Ceryssa had lived too long beside neglect to be shocked by danger. This was worse. The terror that the one thing that had finally answered her had been silenced before she understood it. Maddoc stepped toward the ring. White ash hissed up from the floor. Do not, Vaust choked. Morn frost ash feeds on blood debt. Vaelthorne blood will make it close faster. Maddoc did not stop. Phaedra's smile returned. Listen to your keeper of records. If you cross my king, the ring will read your house's debt and crush what stands inside it. Maddoc looked at Ceryssa through the pale haze. I said no one touches her. Then he stepped into the ash. The frost struck him at once. It climbed over his boot, locked around his ankle, and bit through the black leather with a sound like teeth in bone. A muscle jumped in his jaw, but he did not retreat. He forced another step. The ring tightened. White veins raced toward Ceryssa's skirts. Maddoc, she said sharply, not gratitude. Warning. He stopped because she had spoken, not because Phaedra had. Ceryssa looked down at the ash. It did not feel empty. That was the mistake everyone else had made. They saw frost. She felt memory. Bitter, starved old memory. Not the silence of dead fire, but the rage of fire's denied breath. The cold hearthstone had not gone cold because Phaedra was stronger. It had gone cold because it was listening. Ceryssa knelt inside the ring. Phaedra's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? Ceryssa set one hand on the floor palm against the frost ash. Pain shot through her fingers. Images broke open beneath her skin. A mountain hearth smothered under tax law. A widow's fire seized for unpaid grain. A border pack forced to kneel before Morn soldiers while their winter flame was scraped into glass vials. Not one hearth. Dozens. Ceryssa lifted her head slowly. This is not containment, she said. This is stolen hearth ash. A tremor passed through the servants. The Morn lords went still. Phaedra's face did not change quickly enough. Maddoc saw it. So that is what your treaty carries, he said. Not banners. Dead fires. Phaedra snapped. Dead fires cannot testify. The ash wolf in the first fire pit opened its ember jaws. Ceryssa spoke before it could. Then I will ask them. She pressed both hands to the frost ash. The pain was immediate. White, cold cut beneath her nails. Her breath vanished. The cold hearthstone still against her wrist gave no heat. No rescue. No command. Good. She was tired of being rescued by things that waited until she bled. Ceryssa bent closer to the floor and whispered, "Who kept you before they took you?" For a moment, nothing answered. Then the frost ash shivered. A red spark appeared beneath her palm, not from the cold hearthstone, from the stolen ash. A woman's voice rose from the floor, cracked and distant. Mara of East Hollow. Another spark. Tovin of the River Gate. Another. Sella Widow of Blackfin. Names began to whisper through the white ring. Dozens. Then more. Every stolen hearth Phaedra had ground into frost. Ash gave back the name of the hand that had once kept it alive. The ring faltered. Phaedra backed away. Silenced them. One of her lords drew his sword. Maddoc moved faster. Even with frost locked around his leg, he caught the man's wrist and twisted. Bone cracked. The sword fell before it could clear the sheath. "No more blades near hearth names," Maddoc said. His voice was calm. That made it worse. Ceryssa did not look away from the ash. "You wanted to contain a keeper with stolen fires," she said to Phaedra. "But hearths remember theft too." The cold hearthstone warmed again. Not fully. Enough. Red light moved from Ceryssa's palms into the frost ash. The white ring did not explode. It changed. Frost melted into grey soot. Grey soot turned ember red. Around Ceryssa, each stolen name burned once across the floor before sinking into the stone. The servants nearest her gasped as warmth returned. Maddoc's frozen boot cracked free. Phaedra stared at the ruined ring with true fear now. Ceryssa rose slowly, her fingers white with cold her eyes on the woman in bridal silk. "I will return those fires too," she said. "Not to your treaty, to the hands you stole them from." The ash wolf lifted its head. Beneath the dead first fire, the black tablet split open a second time. A new line burned through the dark. "A hearth claim may call back every stolen flame," Phaedra whispered. "If she does that, half the eastern packs will turn on House Morn." Ceryssa looked at Maddoc, then at the court, then opened the doors. Bronze hinges screamed as winter rushed into the First Pack Hearth. Cold flooded the hall in a white breath. Servants staggered. Nobles raised sleeves over their faces. Beyond the doors, the palace corridors lay almost black, their stone ribs silvered with frost. Guards stood with dead torches in their hands, eyes wide armor crusted in ice. Farther down, where the kitchen passage bent toward the lower rooms, people huddled in shadows around lamps that would not light. Ceryssa stepped to the threshold with the cold hearthstone against her chest. The red flames followed her. Not enough to save the palace. Not yet. Phaedra moved behind her, voice sharp with panic disguised as command. "If you release stolen fire without treaty witness, you will start a pack war." Ceryssa did not turn. "You started one when you bottled their hearths. They were penalties, lawful seizures. They were winters." The words carried down the corridor. A few guards looked at Phaedra then, not openly, not bravely, but enough. Maddoc saw it. So did Phaedra. Her face tightened. "My king, stop her. If those eastern hearths return to their old keepers, House Morn loses lawful leverage over 6 border packs." Ceryssa almost smiled. Leverage. That was what Phaedra called warmth in another person's hands. Maddoc stepped beside Ceryssa close enough that his shadow touched the red light, but not close enough to claim it. "No," he said. "She names what was stolen." Phaedra's eyes flashed. "And if the eastern packs turn on my house, then your house should have feared the hands it robbed." A Morn lord drew steel. This time 3 others followed. The sound of blades scraping free cut through the frozen hall. Maddoc did not draw his sword. He shifted. Not fully. Not into the monstrous war form whispered of in northern camps. But enough. His shoulders widened beneath the black mantle. His eyes burned pale gold. The air filled with the pressure of an alpha wolf holding back violence by choice rather than weakness. "Point one blade at her," he said, "and I will answer as king before dawn and as wolf before your next breath." The blades lowered half an inch. Ceryssa did not wait for permission. She walked into the corridor and knelt where the frost lay thickest. The cold hearthstone pulsed once against her palms. Beneath the stone floor, the stolen hearth names from Phaedra's shattered frost ash whispered again faint and far. Mara of East Hollow, Tovin of the River Gate, Sella of Blackfen. Dozens more crowded behind them, voices like sparks trapped under snow. Ceryssa pressed the stone to the floor. "I do not call you to me," she whispered. "I call you home." The corridor shook. Red light shot outward beneath the stone thin as veins, racing past guards' boots under walls, through old chimney channels and frozen hearth tunnels. It did not burn flesh. It did not warm noble silk. It moved with purpose, carrying names away from the First Pack Hearth and back toward the hands that had lost them. Somewhere far beyond the palace, a wolf howled. Then another. Then another. Not mourning. Answering. A guard at the outer passage dropped to one knee, listening to a cry no one else could hear. "The West Watchtower," he said hoarsely. Its brazier just lit red. Another voice called from below. "The lower kitchens have flame." A servant began to sob. Ceryssa stayed kneeling, fingers locked around the stone. Each returned fire pulled through her like thread through an open wound. She felt East Hollow flare in a cottage hearth. River Gate blaze beneath a guard post. Blackfen's widow fire rise in a cracked stone basin while an old woman screamed the name Sella into the dark. The cold hearthstone grew heavier. Maddoc noticed. "Enough," he said quietly. "Not command. Concern." Ceryssa shook her head. "Not while I still hear them." Phaedra moved fast. She snatched the broken half of the record knife from where it had fallen near the hearth dais and drove it toward the red vein of light running beneath the corridor floor. Vaust cried out. No, the blade struck the fire path. The red light split. Ceryssa gasped as pain tore up her arm. Several distant voices vanished at once, cut off mid-name. Maddoc caught Phaedra's wrist before she could strike again. This time he did not merely stop her. He forced her hand open. The broken blade fell and rang against the stone. "You have threatened my crown," he said. "You have poisoned my hearth. You have raised blades in my hall." But cutting names on their way home, his voice dropped. "That ends now." Phaedra's beauty twisted. "You fool. You think she is saving you. If every stolen flame returns, the Eastern Packs will know my house controlled them. They will not bow to Morn. They will not bow to Vaelthorne either. They will come here to claim her." Ceryssa lifted her head. The red light beneath the floor flared once. From beyond the open doors a horn sounded. Not Vaelthorne, not Palace. Eastern. A second horn answered it from the outer wall, then a third. A guard ran into view, breathless frost in his beard. "My king," he said, staring past Maddoc to Ceryssa. "Housemorn banners are turning in the courtyard." Phaedra smiled through Maddoc's grip. Outside, wolves began to howl for war. Steel boots struck the outer stones before the war horns finished crying. The courtyard beyond the First Pack Hearth had become a bowl of blue-black winter. Morn banners snapped in the frozen wind-white wolves painted on dark green cloth, their edges glazed with ice. Soldiers who had arrived as wedding escorts now formed ranks between the palace doors and the eastern gate shields, lifted spears angled inward. Not at Maddoc, at Ceryssa. The red fire at her feet slipped over the threshold and touched the courtyard stones. It did not spread to the Morn ranks. It did not warm their blades. It curled only around the servants, the palace guards, and the half-frozen wolves who had stumbled from dark corridors seeking heat. Phaedra saw the pattern and hated it. "Seize her," she commanded. "Alive. The hearth cannot return what it no longer carries." Maddoc released her wrist and stepped in front of Ceryssa. For one breath, the old court saw the Alpha King they feared, black mantle whipping in the winter wind, blood on his hand, pale gold eyes burning with enough violence to quiet a battlefield. His wolf pressed beneath his skin, enormous and furious. Then his breath caught. Only Ceryssa saw it at first. A thin line of frost appeared at the edge of his collar, crawling up from beneath the mantle. His fingers tightened once, not around a sword, but against pain. The cold was not touching him from outside. It was coming from within. Phaedra smiled slowly. "There it is," she said. "The Vaelthorne secret." Maddoc's gaze snapped to her. She lifted her voice for the courtyard. Ask your king why he needed my treaty so badly. Ask why the first fire dimmed every winter after his father died. Ask why his wolf has not shifted fully before court in 3 years. A murmur passed through the soldiers. Ceryssa looked at Maddoc. He did not deny it. The frost at his throat spread another inch. Phaedra's smile turned cruel. The crown is freezing from the inside. His wolf is dying because the hearth rejects Vaelthorne blood. My house offered Eastern fire to keep him standing, and now your precious hearth claim would rather feed border peasants than save her king. Ceryssa felt the blow of it. Not because Phaedra had spoken truth, because she had twisted need into ownership again. Maddoc said, "Do not listen to her." Cerissa's eyes stayed on his throat. "Is your wolf dying?" His silence answered. The courtyard seemed to tilt. All those years she had prayed for him to return from war, all those nights she had warmed the first fire without knowing it listened, had some part of that warmth kept him alive too. Maddoc turned toward her, and for the first time, his command broke into something raw. "I did not know it was you." "No," she said. "You only knew someone was paying." The words hurt him. They were meant to. A spear scraped stone. Morn soldiers advanced. Maddoc turned back, forcing himself upright, but his wolf shadow flickered at his feet, weak at the edges. The dying cold inside him fought the red fire following Ceryssa, and for one terrible moment she understood the shape of the trap. If she restored the first fire without terms, the court would bind her to Maddoc as medicine. If she refused, his wolf might die, and the kingdom would blame her for letting its alpha fall. Phaedra had built a cage from both mercy and guilt. Ceryssa lifted the cold hearthstone. The red light beneath the courtyard stones flared. "Stop!" Her voice did not thunder. The fire did. Every returned flame she had called home answered at once. Red lines burned across the courtyard, spreading outward in a wheel of names: Mara of East Hollow, Tovin of Rivergate, Seller of Blackfen, and dozens more. The names circled the Morn soldiers' boots, not burning them, but marking the stones beneath their feet with the hands their house had robbed. A Morn captain looked down and went pale. Ceryssa walked past Maddoc. He reached as if to stop her, then let his hand fall. Good. She faced the soldiers herself. "I will not be taken by House Morn," she said. "I will not be hidden by House Vaelthorne. I will not be poured into a king, a treaty, or a bride's cup of law." Phaedra's expression hardened. Pretty words from a girl holding a kingdom hostage. "No," Ceryssa said. "Terms." The ash wolf appeared behind her in the open doorway, smoke and ember forming from the dead hall. Its head nearly touched the lintel. Ceryssa raised the stone higher. Every stolen fire returns to its keeper. Every hearth bound to the first fire remains bound only by consent. No house will seize warmth from another under tax treaty, marriage, or crown command. The names on the courtyard stones burned brighter. Morn soldiers began lowering their spears. Phaedra saw control slipping from her hands, so she drew the last blade herself. Not steel. A marriage dagger hidden in the sleeve of her bridal gown, its edge blackened with frost ash. She lunged for the red name nearest her feet. Maddoc moved despite the cold eating him alive. He caught the dagger in his bare hand. The blade sank through his palm. Black frost shot up his arm. Ceryssa cried his name before she could stop herself. Maddoc dropped to one knee. His wolf shadow convulsed, then split open with a sound like ice cracking over deep water. Beneath the shadow, Ceryssa saw the truth Phaedra had exposed: a great pale wolf curled around a dying ember where its heart should have burned. The ash wolf lowered its ancient head. "The first fire can be restored," it growled, "but the old claim must be released." Ceryssa turned slowly. Maddoc looked up at her, frost crawling across his jaw. The ash wolf spoke the price before anyone else could weaponize it. Vaelthorne must release the hearth claim freely. If he does, her fire returns to itself. If he does not, his wolf dies with the dawn. Dawn had not broken, but its cold had already entered the courtyard. It silvered the stones. It whitened the fallen spears. It crept over Maddoc's kneeling body while his wolf shadow shuddered at his feet, the great pale shape curled around a failing ember inside its chest. Ceryssa stood above him with the cold hearthstone burning in her hands. Every eye in the courtyard watched her. Morn soldiers, Vaelthorne guards, servants wrapped in thin cloaks, noble wolves who had laughed when she carried the stone, Lord Vaust still on his knees, Lady Phaedra breathing hard in her ruined wedding silk, her frost-ash dagger black with Maddoc's blood. Phaedra spoke first. "Let him die," she said. Maddoc's head lifted a fraction. Ceryssa did not look away from Phaedra. The false bride's voice turned soft, almost tender. "That is freedom, is it not? Vaelthorne used you. Vaelthorne hid you. Vaelthorne fed its throne from your warmth and called you burden. If he releases you now, you owe him nothing. Let his wolf go cold. Let the crown learn the price of forgetting you." The cruelty of it was that part of her spoke the truth. Ceryssa owed Maddoc nothing. Not the warmth in her palms, not the ache in her throat, not the old memory of a boy's cloak around her shoulders. Not one more prayer beside a fire that had taken her girlhood and returned only ash script. Maddoc knew it too. He dragged his bleeding hand from the frost and placed it flat on the courtyard stone. "Ceryssa Lowen," he said, voice rough with cold, "before the first pack, before the stolen hearths, before the old wolf and the breaking dawn, I release you from every Vaelthorne claim." The courtyard went still. Phaedra's smile vanished. Maddoc forced the words out, each one cutting deeper than the frost in his veins. "No blood of mine may command your fire. No law of mine may bind your name. No debt of my house may be paid from your hands without your consent. If my wolf dies, it dies owing you truth, not demanding mercy." The cold hearthstone flared. Not for him, for the release. Ceryssa felt it move through her like a door opening inside her chest. No, not a door. A breath. The first full breath she had taken in years. The red names on the courtyard stones brightened. Mara of East Hollow, Tovin of Rivergate, Sella of Blackfen. Dozens more. Hundreds beyond them carried through the veins of fire beneath the kingdom. Ceryssa turned to the court. "My terms stand," she said. "Every stolen fire returns to its keeper. Every hearth bound to the first fire remains bound by consent. Every hand that keeps a flame will be named in the record paid in winter and protected by law." No one spoke, so she looked at Phaedra. "House Morn will answer to every pack it froze." Phaedra stepped back. "You have no court title." Ceryssa lifted the cold hearthstone. "No," she said. "I have their names." At once the red writing beneath the soldiers' boots burned hotter. Morn men looked down as the stolen hearth names circled them like living witnesses. One by one, spears lowered, not to Maddoc, to the names. An older Morn captain removed his helm. His face was grey. "My lady," he said to Phaedra. "My mother's hearth was Blackfen." Phaedra's eyes widened. The captain looked at Ceryssa. "Return it, Hearthclaim. We will witness." That broke the line. Not with battle, with memory. Soldiers who had marched under Phaedra's banner stepped away from her one after another, leaving her in a widening circle of cold. Her bridal furs stirred in the wind like torn snow. "You will regret this," she whispered. Ceryssa looked at the frost-ash dagger in Phaedra's hand. "No, you will remember it." The ash wolf exhaled. Grey ember smoke wrapped around Phaedra's wrist. The dagger fell. Where the smoke touched her skin, a black mark appeared. Not a wound, not a brand of ownership, but a ring of tiny extinguished flames. The ash wolf's voice rolled over the courtyard. "Let every hearth she stole deny her warmth until each name is answered." Phaedra screamed then. Not from pain, from understanding. No hearth would open to her by stolen lore again. Ceryssa turned back to Maddoc. He was nearly still now. Frost had reached his jaw. His wolf shadow had stopped convulsing and lay silent around its ember heart. The old part of her hurt. The new part of her chose. She knelt not to the crown, not to the Vaelthorne debt, not to the boy he had been or the king who had failed her. She knelt because the kingdom held servants, guards, border, widows, nameless hands and fires that deserved to live without being stolen. She set the cold hearthstone between herself and Maddoc. "You do not get my fire because you released me," she said. His eyes opened pale and dim. "I know. You get it because I choose what kind of keeper I become." His breath shook. Ceryssa placed one hand on the stone and one over the frozen wound in his palm. "Then live," she said, "and spend the rest of your reign-proving release was not your last honorable act." Red fire entered him. Maddoc arched once silent as the frost shattered across his throat and arm. His wolf shadow opened around the dying ember. Flame caught there, not roaring, not claiming, not devouring. A small, steady fire given freely, and therefore stronger than anything the old Vaelthorne line had stolen. Across the courtyard, the First Pack Hearth ignited. Then the guard towers. Then the kitchens. Then the sick rooms. Then the outer camps, the border cottages, the river posts, East Hollow Rivergate, Blackfin, and every hearth whose keeper had been named. Dawn broke over smoke rising from a kingdom that had almost frozen from forgetting the hands that warmed it. Maddoc bowed his head over Ceryssa's hand, not kissing, not claiming, witnessing. "What do I call you now?" he asked. Ceryssa looked toward the First Pack Hearth where servants stood beside nobles and no one dared push them away from the returning warmth. "My name," she said. "Start there." Maddoc's mouth tightened with something too wounded to be a smile, too honest to be pride. "Ceryssa Lowen," he said. The cold hearthstone glowed between them. Not cold, not owned, kept. And for the first time in the long history of the First Pack Hearth, the fire burned only where consent allowed it to stay.